Okay, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to give you a brief overview of the interface in Maya. As you can see, there's a whole lot of menus and commands and shelves and all sorts of things that make Maya a little bit overwhelming to a new user. I compare it to walking into the cockpit of an airplane. For someone who drives a car, it can be overwhelming because there's just so many buttons and dials. So try not to get confused and overwhelmed. Let me show you some of the things that you'll need to know. Now granted, you don't need to know all of the commands and buttons and menus and everything that they do. So if you look at the top here, we have kind of a standard list of drop-down menus. You'll find that there's often 2 or 3 different ways to do each thing in Maya. So most of what is up here in these drop-down menus can also be found somewhere else, like one of these icons in a shelf, one of the tabs, these different tabs. Things can also be found in contextual menus and hotbox menus, like if I hold down the space bar at certain times I can get a whole set of menus, hidden menus, called marking menus. When you're modeling and texturing, most of what you're going to need would be found in these drop-down menus. Also very useful are these tabs over here that will reorganize your toolboxes based on the function that you're trying to accomplish. So you have animation, polygons, surfaces, dynamics, rendering, and so forth. I usually like to keep this on polygons when I'm working as a modeler and texturer rather than animation or some of these other options. Okay, so this will give you different menus, different drop-down menus. Make sure that's on polygons. Also, in these tabs right here, you have a set of icons. These are buttons that will help you do certain functions. And again, for the purposes of this class, we're not going to use most of these because they get into a lot of the details of what Maya is capable of, but they're not really necessary for basic modeling and texturing. So here's some general functions. We can go over those. Here's some curves that you can use to create shapes. Most of what we're going to be doing will be polygonal modeling, so we won't use curves very much, or surfaces, but just know that these are different ways of creating shapes, three-dimensional forms in Maya. Under the Polygons tab, we have a whole set of what's called primitive or basic shapes. These are the cones and the spheres that I was creating earlier in the first video. We also have some basic modeling functions, and we can go through those in detail in a later video. That's what these icons are for. These are the ones that most people who are modeling use most often. Okay. And then over here, these black and white icons, these have to do with texturing, so we'll get to those when we're texturing. Over on the left, we have selection tools. The first selection tool is your basic selector. It allows me to click once on an object to select it, or drag a marquee around multiple objects to select them. I also have a lasso selection tool, which allows me to create specific selections. I also have what's called a paint selection tool, which allows me to select or unselect sub-objects like vertices by painting them. These next 3 icons on the left will allow me to move, rotate, or scale objects. This icon is interesting. It's the last tool used, so I've created a cylinder. That was the last thing I did, and it leaves a little icon there for me to repeat that if I want to. These icons over to the left here toward the bottom are different views of your scene. You have a basic perspective view here that will show me all the objects in my scene that are visible. Okay. I have a 4-up panel layout that gives me the perspective view, a top view, a front view, and a side view. I have the perspective view and outliner. The outliner is this panel that shows me everything that's in my scene in a list form that's expandable, so I can see the objects that are linked together, that are grouped and parented to each other, and some of the nodes that are associated with them. I also have the perspective and graph view, so this would be useful for animation. This is the hypershade and perspective view, so in my perspective view here I can see my objects, and the hypershade is going to allow me to texture this scene, the objects in the scene, by creating what's called materials to shade the surface or texture the surface of the object. Down below you have a status bar. When you're hovering over something, it'll often give you information about what that is. We also have a button up here on the right that will show or hide certain panels, so we can toggle that on and off. This gives us the tool settings. The one with the wrench there, that's tool settings. This one gives us the channel box and layer editor, which we'll talk about later. This one gives us the attribute editor. Whenever we have an object selected, we can see attributes of that object in this attribute editor. This button is also going to toggle that on and off. There's a new thing in Maya 2014 and 2015 which is called the Modeling Toolkit, and here's a toggle that will open and shut your Modeling Toolkit. You'll notice that when you have all of these toggled on, or more than one of them toggled on, except for the tool settings, these other ones will usually be on the right side by default, and they'll be nested with tabs so that you can switch back and forth in between them without closing them. But when I'm modeling, I like to have as few things open as I need, so I'll usually toggle them off and get them out of the way so I can focus on my scene. You also have this row of icons in between your top menu and these tabs, and this is going to give you a bunch of different functions like snapping, rendering tools, opening and closing your scene, saving your scenes, and so forth. And within each viewport you have a set of tabs and commands as well. So that's a basic orientation of the Maya user interface. We'll get into more depth with what is in these drop-down menus and what they do as we go forth.